When we think of suffering, we tend to recoil. It's natural. Pain feels like a force to avoid, something to escape from, to minimize, to numb. But imagine for a moment that pain is not only unavoidable but essential. What if suffering, in all its forms, is not just the background noise of life but its very music? Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who lived through more pain than most of us can comprehend, didn't merely endure suffering, he turned it into a philosophy of creation, of art, of transcendence. He dared to ask, what if the worst moments of your life are what make the best within you possible? We live in a culture obsessed with comfort. Everything promises ease, faster service, instant gratification, fewer obstacles. But when we remove suffering, what do we lose? Nietzsche's philosophy forces us to confront this question. He doesn't comfort us with illusions of a painless existence. Instead, he challenges us to face suffering directly and see it as a source of meaning. He asks us to consider that pain, far from being an enemy, could be the forge in which our greatest selves are formed. And this is the radical core of his thinking. Suffering is not just something to get through, it is something to use. Consider Nietzsche's own life. He was plagued by debilitating health issues, loneliness, rejection, and despair. He was a man who spent most of his days in physical agony, isolated from the world, misunderstood by nearly everyone around him. And yet, from this pain, he created works of staggering insight and beauty. His philosophy, in many ways, is a rebellion against despair. It is a refusal to let suffering have the last word. Instead, he asks us to transform it into something higher. But how? How do we take the raw material of pain and turn it into art, into meaning, into life itself? To understand this, we must first confront Nietzsche's idea of the will to power. For Nietzsche, life is not about survival or happiness, it is about growth, strength, and overcoming. Pain, then, is not a failure of life, but a necessary part of it. Growth cannot happen without resistance. Strength cannot emerge without struggle. And overcoming the very essence of life requires something to overcome. When you feel pain, Nietzsche would argue, it is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that life is working on you, shaping you, challenging you to become more than you are. But are we willing to embrace this? Are we willing to see suffering not as a curse, but as a call to create?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about the moments in your life when you've grown the most. Were they the easy times, the moments of comfort and success? Or were they the painful times, the moments when everything fell apart, when you were forced to confront your limits, your fears, your failures? Nietzsche's philosophy reminds us that these moments are not accidents. They are the crucibles in which we are forged. But this process is not automatic. Pain can destroy us just as easily as it can transform us. The question is, what do you do with your suffering? Nietzsche gives us a clue in his concept of amor fati, the love of fate. This is not just acceptance of what happens to us, it is an active embrace of it. To love your fate is to say yes to everything in life, even the things that hurt, even the things that break you. It is to see every moment, every experience, as necessary, as meaningful, as part of the process of becoming who you are. But this is not easy. It requires a radical shift in perspective. It requires us to stop asking, why me, and start asking, what can I create from this? Creation, for Nietzsche, is the key. When we suffer, we have a choice. We can wallow in our pain, let it consume us, or we can use it as fuel for something greater. This is what Nietzsche means when he says that one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos of life, the pain, the confusion, the struggle is not something to be eliminated. It is the raw material of creation. Without it, there is no art, no beauty, no meaning. But how many of us are willing to embrace our chaos? How many of us are willing to turn our suffering into a work of art? Art, for Nietzsche, is not limited to painting or music or literature. It is a way of living. It is the act of taking the raw material of life, no matter how messy or painful, and shaping it into something meaningful. It is the refusal to let life happen to you and the determination to create something out of it. This is why Nietzsche admired figures like Beethoven, who turned his deafness into some of the most profound music ever written, or Goethe, who transformed his struggles into timeless literature. These are not just artists, they are creators of meaning. They are examples of what it means to turn suffering into art. But what about us? Most of us are not Beethoven or Goethe. Most of us are just trying to get through the day. How can we apply Nietzsche's philosophy to our own lives? The first step is to stop running from our pain. We live in a world that offers endless distractions to numb us, to help us avoid the discomfort of existence. But Nietzsche would argue that this avoidance is a kind of death. To truly live, we must face our pain, confront it, and ask what it has to teach us. This is not easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to see ourselves as we truly are. But it is the only way to grow. The second step is to find a way to express our suffering. This doesn't mean we all need to become artists in the traditional sense. It means finding a way to channel our pain into something constructive. This could be through writing, or music, or simply the way we live our lives. It could mean using our struggles to help others, to connect with them on a deeper level. It could mean finding meaning in our suffering by seeing it as part of a larger story, a story we are actively shaping. The point is not to eliminate our suffering, but to transform it, to turn it into something that enriches our lives and the lives of others. Finally, we must learn to love our suffering. This may seem impossible, even absurd. How can we love something that hurts us, that breaks us? But this is the ultimate challenge of Nietzsche's philosophy. To love our suffering is to love life itself, in all its complexity and contradiction. It is to see pain not as an obstacle but as an opportunity. It is to say yes to life, not in spite of its difficulties but because of them. This is what it means to live fully, to embrace the chaos, to create meaning where none seems to exist. So I ask you, what will you do with your suffering? Will you let it define you, consume you, destroy you? Or will you use it as a catalyst for growth, for creation, for transcendence? Nietzsche's philosophy does not offer easy answers or comforting illusions. It demands that we face life as it is, with all its pain and beauty, and find a way to say yes to it. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It is a path for those who are willing to confront the deepest truths of existence and use them to create something extraordinary. Are you willing to take that path? If suffering is the raw material of creation, then our lives become the canvas. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to see ourselves as not just passive recipients of life's pain, but as active artists, shaping and transforming that pain into something meaningful. The question is no longer why do we suffer, but what can we make of our suffering? This shift in perspective is profound. Instead of seeing ourselves as victims of fate, we become participants in it, collaborators with it. But to live this way, to truly live this way, requires more than intellectual agreement. It requires a transformation of how we see ourselves and the world around us. Nietzsche speaks often of the Uber Mensch, sometimes translated as the overman or superman. This concept has been misunderstood and misused more than almost any other in his philosophy. It is not about physical power or domination, but about the ability to overcome, to take what is given, no matter how painful or difficult, and use it to create something higher. The Uber Mansch is not a person who avoids suffering, but one who transforms it, who uses it as a stepping stone to a greater self. And here lies the challenge for all of us. How do we become the artists of our own lives? How do we take the raw, often brutal material of existence and shape it into something beautiful? To answer this, we must first confront the reality of suffering itself. We live in a world that tries to sanitize pain, to hide it, to medicate it away. But Nietzsche insists that suffering is not only unavoidable, it is necessary. Think of a sculptor working with marble. The raw block of stone is unformed, chaotic, meaningless. It is only through the act of carving, through removing, chiseling, breaking, that the sculpture emerges. The process is violent, destructive even, but it is also creative. Without the resistance of the stone, without the hard labor of shaping it, there would be no art. Nietzsche asks us to see our lives in the same way. The suffering we endure is not pointless. It is the chisel that shapes us, the force that gives form to the chaos of our existence. But are we willing to endure the carving? This is where many of us falter. When faced with pain, our instinct is to resist it, to fight against it, to see it as an enemy. But resistance alone is not enough. Nietzsche warns us of the danger of resentment, of becoming so consumed by our suffering that we turn bitter, angry, vengeful. Resentment poisons the soul. It traps us in a cycle of blame and victimhood, preventing us from transforming our pain into something meaningful. To live as an artist of life, we must move beyond resentment. But how do we do this? How do we let go of our anger and use our suffering instead of being used by it? One answer lies in Nietzsche's concept of the eternal recurrence. Imagine, he says, that you are forced to live your life over and over again, exactly as it is, with every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every failure, every moment of ecstasy and every moment of despair. Would you curse this eternal repetition, or would you embrace it? Would you see your life as a burden or as a work of art, worth living not just once but an infinite number of times? This thought experiment is not meant to be taken literally. It is a test of how we view our lives. If the idea of eternal recurrence fills us with dread, it is a sign that we are not living authentically. We are not embracing our fate, not loving our lives as they are. To live fully, Nietzsche insists, is to say yes to life, not just to the parts we enjoy, but to all of it, even the suffering, even the chaos. But saying yes to life is not passive acceptance. It is an active, creative act. It is the willingness to take what life gives us, no matter how painful, and use it to create something greater. This is what Nietzsche means when he speaks of the will to power. The will to power is not a desire for control over others, it is the drive to overcome, to grow, to create. It is the force that turns suffering into strength, chaos into order, pain into art. When we live with the will to power, we stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance and start seeing ourselves as creators. We stop asking, why did this happen to me, and start asking, what can I do with this? But creation is not easy. It requires discipline, courage, and imagination. Think of a writer sitting down to compose a novel. The blank page is terrifying. It is empty, formless, filled with potential, but also with the possibility of failure. The act of writing is an act of creation, but it is also an act of struggle against doubt, against fear, against the chaos of ideas that refuse to take shape. Life, Nietzsche would say, is no different. We are all writers, and our lives are the blank pages. The question is, what story will we tell? Will we let the chaos overwhelm us, or will we shape it into something meaningful? Nietzsche offers us a model for this in his own life. Despite his immense suffering, his chronic illness, his loneliness, his rejection, he never stopped creating. He wrote some of his greatest works from a place of physical and emotional agony. He could have given up, could have let his pain define him. But instead he used it. He turned his suffering into philosophy, into art, into a legacy that continues to inspire us today. This is not to say that Nietzsche's life was easy or that his suffering was somehow justified. But it does show us what is possible when we refuse to let pain have the last word. So what does this mean for us? How do we live as artists of life, as creators of meaning? The first step is to change how we see our suffering. Instead of viewing it as a punishment or a failure, we must see it as an opportunity. This does not mean we have to enjoy our pain or pretend it doesn't hurt. It means recognizing that pain is a necessary part of growth, a sign that we are alive, that we are being shaped into something greater. It means asking not how we can avoid suffering, but how we can use it. The second step is to find a way to express our pain. Nietzsche believed that art is the highest expression of the human spirit. Art is not just about beauty, it is about truth, about confronting the reality of existence and finding a way to transcend it. This does not mean we all need to become painters or poets. It means finding a way to channel our suffering into something constructive. It could be through writing or music, or simply the way we live our lives. It could mean using our pain to connect with others, to understand them, to help them. The point is not to escape our suffering, but to transform it, to make it meaningful. Finally, we must cultivate a love of life, not just the easy, joyful parts, but all of it, even the suffering. This is the essence of amor fati. To love our fate is to love our lives as they are, not as we wish they could be. It is to see every moment, every experience, as necessary, as part of the process of becoming who we are. This is not an easy task. It requires us to let go of our resentment, our bitterness, our desire for life to be different. It requires us to embrace the chaos, to find meaning in the struggle, to create something beautiful from the pain. So I ask you again, what will you do with your suffering? Will you let it consume you, define you, destroy you? Or will you use it as a catalyst for growth, for creation, for transcendence? Nietzsche's philosophy does not offer easy answers or comforting illusions. It demands that we confront life as it is, with all its pain and beauty, and find a way to say yes to it. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It is a path for those who are willing to confront the deepest truths of existence and use them to create something extraordinary. Are you willing to take that path?